Всем привет, Андрей Сикорский, Киберок. Занимаюсь
Hi everyone, my name is Andrei
CyberOk.
Sikorsky.
Занимаюсь развитием
I'm
экспертизы
CyberOK.
по выявлению атак и
I
реагированию
develop
на компьютерные
expertise
инциденты.
on
Всем привет, меня зовут
attacks
Антон, я работаю в
identification
Positive
and incidents
Technologies.
response. Hi, my name is
И
Anton. I'm with Positive
сейчас
Technologies.
мы расскажем
And
вам
now
немножечко
we
про
are
наш продукт,
going
про
to
наш проект открытый.
tell you a little bit about our product,
Значит,
about
мы
our
сейчас выступаем
project.
от лица комьюнити,
Now
security
we
experts
speak on behalf
community,
of the
и весь
community, the
пользовательский трек у
security
нас
experts
про наши
community, and
проекты.
the whole track today is
Можете
dedicated to
отсканировать
our
QR-код, перейти в
project,
чатик,
to our
там подробнее можно почитать про те проекты, которые уже
projects.
опубликованы.
In the chat, you
И в
can find
целом
more
мы
information about the projects
ставим
that
перед
were
собой
already published.
целью объединить экспертов для того, чтобы продвигать идею экспертной
Our
открытости.
idea is to bring together the experts to
Хотелось
promote
бы
the
немножечко в вводной части рассказать,
experts'
на
openness
что нацелен
as a
открытый
concept.
наш фреймворк ERM&CK,
To start with,
потому что
we
часто
would
многие
like to
путают
discuss the
реагирование
purpose
инцидентов и
of
расследование.
ERM&CK,
И
our
когда мы говорим
framework.
о том, что у нас есть цель
Very often
формализовать
people
этот домен знаний,
confuse
некоторые люди, особенно
technical
специалисты в области,
investigation
говорят,
and
что
a
невозможно
response.
формализовать
Very
реагирование, потому
often
что вот мы, когда
people
приезжаем
believe
на
that it's
реагирование,
not
на
possible
расследование,
to
мы обычно
formalize response.
производим
When you
очень
start
сложные
investigating, when you start
манипуляции.
responding,
Мы там
actually
берем
you
жесткие диски,
perform a
там,
lot of
блокираторы записи и так далее.
complicated
И очень
actions.
часто
You
ситуации
retrieve the hard
непредсказуемые,
drives,
разнообразные,
etc. And
кейсы,
often
и это невозможно описать и
the
заранее
cases are all
предположить.
very different, and it's not possible
Так
to describe all of them and
основной
input
вектор
them
нашего
into a
проекта, он
model
нацелен
in
именно
advance.
на
The
первичное реагирование для сока.
idea
То
of
есть,
our
что
project
нужно
is
сделать для
to
того, чтобы
facilitate primary response to
текущий
an
инцидент
SOC,
локализовать
so that
и не
a current
позволить хакеру
accident can be
продвинуться дальше.
localized, an incident can
Нам
be
не нужно
localized, and
восстановить всю цепочку
the
атаки,
hackers
нам
would be
желательно
prevented
восстановить все точки
from making further
закрепления,
progress. We do
понять,
not
где он
want to
сейчас
identify
есть
the whole
и как
change. We
сделать так,
just
чтобы
need
он
to
дальше не
understand
продвинулся.
where the hackers are at the moment and how
После
to
того, как
prevent them
соответственно вот эти
from
все
advancing
точки закрепления
further.
сделаны, потом проведено
After
расследование,
we've
в
done the
целом в рамках
anchoring
вот
and
этого
we ran the
большого реагирования, да,
investigation,
можно
as part
провести
of
какие-то
this
там
big
работы над ошибками,
response
вот, и поправить свои
work,
процессы.
you can also do
Если же
some
говорить, в чем
homework
же
and
заключается
fix your
техническое расследование,
processes, make
то, как мы
adjustments.
знаем,
As to the
благодаря
technical
техническому расследованию
investigation
можно собрать
itself and
улики,
its
которые потом
essence, in a technical
применимо в суде,
investigation, you
их
collect
можно
evidence
там
that you can take to
приложить там,
court,
к материалу дела и так
and
далее.
you can attach the
Специалисты
evidence
проводят
to
глубокий
your
анализ
case, to your
цифровых улик, их
file.
собирают,
The
анализируют,
experts
строят большие
carry out
таймлайны,
in-depth
потом
analysis
строят
of
большие
the
отчеты.
evidence. They
Это
build
очень часто
timelines, they
занимает
publish
продолжительное
reports.
время, иногда
Often it
даже
takes
месяцы.
a long time,
Вот.
sometimes it
С
takes
точки зрения
months.
именно реагирования в соке,
So in terms of
зачастую очень
responding in
важно
an
как можно
SOC,
быстрее
at the
предпринять
level
какие-то
of an
действия
SOC,
и не
what
обязательно
matters is to take action as soon as
строить
possible
большущий
and
отчет
not
со всеми
necessarily
подробностями.
generate a very
Сейчас
detailed and
Андрей
sophisticated
расскажет немножко про
report.
стандарты, потому что прежде чем
Andrei is
формализовать
going
какой-то
to
домен
discuss the
знаний,
standards for
нужно
a while.
посмотреть,
Before you
что уже
formalize
люди в
some
этом
domain
домене
of
сделали.
knowledge, you need to first understand what was already done in
Да,
this
спасибо, Антон.
area of knowledge.
Стандарты на слайде, которые мы,
Now,
на слайде, который мы
the standards are
просматривали,
shown on the slide.
это
They are
ГОСТ,
the main
я думаю,
standards that
самый
we reviewed.
известный,
The
очень
GOST, the
простой документ,
Russian government standard,
хорошо
it's a
написанный,
great
высокого
document,
уровня,
actually written
о
very
том, как
well.
построить процесс
It's a
реагирования на
high-level document
инциденты,
describing the
формировать
whole
штаты,
incident response process
назначать
and
функциональные роли, и вот это все.
the functional roles
Может
assignment
помочь.
and this and that.
Следующий
I mean,
документ
it's very
готовый
helpful.
инцидент handling guide.
Another this
Соответственно,
document is the incident handling
ну,
guide.
там частично похож на ГОСТ или наоборот.
It's similar to the GOST, or the GOST
Полезный
is similar
документ
to this
тоже
one,
про
to the NIST
организацию
document.
процесса,
It's also
про
very
как создавалась
useful.
такая
It
схема, чтобы
describes
были
process
выделены
organization. This is an
этапы
interesting
реагирования на инцидент.
schematic. It identifies
И
the main
примечательно тем,
steps
что
in
это циклами.
incident
Соответственно, мы что-то
response.
выявляем,
And it's a
анализируем,
cycle, as you can see. We
потом
identify
вычищаем,
something, we
расширяем
analyze it,
скоп анализа,
then
еще что-то
we
новое выявляем. Это вычищаем, все
do
инциденты
eradication,
там
then we do
закончился,
analysis.
подвели итоги,
We do
формализовали все
post-incident
результаты, и главное потом из
activity,
всех
we
результатов
formalize the
перешли
results, and
на
the
стадию
important step
подготовки,
is
чтобы наша
then
инфраструктура
to
была более
use
защищена,
this output
и мы
from
были
the
более
current
подготовлены к
investigation as
реагированию на
the input
инциденты.
for the next investigation,
Еще примечательная
to
мысль,
use
которая в
them
этом документе
again at
описана, это то,
the stage
что
of
в процессе
preparation.
реагирования на инциденты мы должны пользоваться некоторой
In the
магической
process
базой
of
знаний,
incident
которая нам
response, we
всячески
also
должна помогать, но
use a
конкретики
knowledge
про
base
эту
of
базу знаний,
information.
собственно, никакой нет. нет.
That's another statement that you can
Также
do
не
in
ставить
this
cybersecurity framework.
standard. There is
Это немного
also
другой
a
формат
cybersecurity
документ. Он
framework from
покрывает
NIST.
более
It's
широкий спектр
a
доменов
different
information
format of a
security.
document. It covers
Здесь
a broader
выделены
range of
функции,
information
категории,
security
subкатегории. То есть
domains.
функции тоже можно
It
слышать
identifies
конкретно
functions,
там для людей
categories, subcategories,
подразделения.
the functions you can identify
Ну, уже
people,
более
subdivisions,
формализованно, более
units.
структурированная
It's a
такая
very
информация
formalized and
выглядит в заполненном
structured
виде. Она
approach.
плюс-минус так, ну, с разбиением матрицы.
When you fill it out, this is how
Есть,
it's going to
соответственно,
look
домены,
like, more
которые
or less.
непосредственно относятся к
There are
инцидент
some
респонсу. Ну,
domains
собственно, принцип, он
that are
тоже разделен.
associated with the incident
Еще
response
один
per
интересный
se.
документ
Another interesting
создала
document
инициатива, которая
was
сокращенно называется КАКАО.
produced by
КАКАО —
an
это инициатива,
initiative that is
соответственно,
known
которая
as
появилась
Cacao.
благодаря некоммерческой организации
Cacao
ОАСИС. ОАСИС —
was
это хорошо
started
известный
by
более
Oasis,
20
an
лет.
NPO.
Собственно,
Oasis is
ну,
very well-known name in the
благодаря
industry.
этой некоммерческой
It's
организации
been in
появились
existence for about
весьма
20 years,
хорошие и
and thanks to this
годные
NPO, we have
стандарты и какие-то там
good, strong
обобщения. Собственно,
standards
участники
and
инициативы — это большие
generalizations. The members
международные
of this
организации, которые
initiative
так или иначе связаны с information
are
security.
big
Это или вендоры,
international
либо
organizations
ребята, которые конкретно оказывают
in the
сервис.
field of information security. They're
Цели
vendors or
стандарта —
other
это,
people providing
ну,
services.
цели инициативы —
The
это
main objective of this initiative
стандартизировать,
is
описать
to
стандарт машинно
standardize,
читаемых
to
плейбуков для всех доменов природы.
describe
Не только
the
для реагирования,
machine-readable
но и для
scripts for
детектирования,
SecOps,
инвестигейшена и всего
for
такого.
response,
У них
investigation,
получилось сделать
detecting, this and that. They
согласованный документ,
managed to
вышел,
do
кажется,
it,
в
and the
2020
document
году.
was published, if I'm not mistaken, in 2020.
Соответственно, приводится пример. Там JSON-чика с описанием полей,
It
чего они
gives
нужны, как
cases,
заполняется,
examples,
формат данных,
fields, and how the fields should be filled out,
как,
what
ну,
the
из чего
data
состоит вот
format
этот
should
машинно-читаемый
be
плейбук.
used, and the
Как его
machine-readable
подписывать, как
playbook
валидировать
is
подпись, как
fully
его шарить
described how
другому
you subscribe it,
участнику
how do
инициативы.
you
Ну, и общие
share it
инструкции
with
по, в принципе,
another
созданию
member of
сценариев.
the initiative, and it gives you a general
Стандарты
instruction
посмотрели, давайте
on
еще разок
scenario
подумаем,
generation.
насколько нам эти стандарты помогут, когда у
So
нас произошел инцидент,
these
да,
are the standards.
и нам нужно
Can
что-то
they
делать.
be helpful when there is a
Помогут не
real
лучшим образом, потому
incident?
что практически во всех них написано,
The
ну, или должны
standards are
подготовить
not
то-то,
very
то-то, то-то.
helpful
Когда
in
инцидент
dealing with
произошел,
a real-life
наверное, готовиться
incident,
уже
because
немножко
the
поздно.
standards say that
Нужно
this is
знать,
what you
что
should
делать в
prepare
последовательности,
before an
как
incident
необходимо
happens.
с
But
вашими
when the
структурой,
incident
кто это будет
happens, the
делать, и
standards
вообще, в
are a
принципе, ваша
bit too,
IT-инфраструктура должна быть к этому
reading the
готова.
standards are a
Потому
bit
что
too late.
если
Your IT
придет
infrastructure should be
суперкомпетентный
ready
специалист,
to the
который знает,
incident
понимает, что должен
before there
делать,
is an
но он
incident. If
банально
there
не
is a
будет
super
силового
competent
доступа,
specialist,
прав или
but
не будет понимать каких-то
this
модулей
person
по
doesn't have
управлению,
the rights, doesn't
то,
have
собственно,
access
он
to
ничего
the
не сделает.
network, doesn't have the authorities, then this super
Развитием
expert will not be
документов
able to do
является новых
much.
стандартов. Некоторые
As
проекты
a follow-up to the
пилотировали,
standards, you
какие-то
find several projects that
публичные,
are
наиболее известные из них быстренько рассмотрим.
well-known
ЦИСовский
projects,
Vulnerability
public
Response Playbook,
projects, CISA,
Incident Vulnerability
Cybersecurity
Response
Incident
Playbook,
Vulnerability
тоже
Response
к большим
Playbook.
методичкам
It's another major
относится, потому что
methodology,
уровень абстракции достаточно высокий,
and the level of
схемки там
abstraction
нарисованы
here
в
is pretty
таком формате,
high. And this is
можно
the
оценить,
one of the
собственно,
schemes
что
that you
весьма
find there.
абстрактно.
So you can tell that it's very high level.
Высокого уровня описания процесса,
It's a high-level
конкретики
description of the
маловато.
process, very few specific details.
Сами рекомендации не особо гибкие, ну, собственно, это
The
ЦИСа, и
recommendations
она
themselves are not
очень
very flexible
адекватно,
because
ну,
this is
не очень
CISA,
восприимчива к обратной связи
and
от
CISA is not
тех,
very
для кого она
responsive
пишет свои
to
стандарты.
feedback
Следующий
from those
проект —
for
это
whom
Incident Response
they write their
Methodologies
standards.
от
Another
Société
project is
Générale.
incident response
Это
methodologies
проект,
from
ну,
Société
в прошлом году был
Générale
обновлен. Раньше там
CERT.
были
It's an old
схемки
project, but they
по
updated it last
порядка
year.
десятка плейбуков, сейчас стало плейбуков
They
больше.
had about a dozen playbooks to
Детализация
start
описания
with.
стала
Now they have
больше.
even more,
Выглядит это теперь
and
в
the
третий уровень,
utilization of
как, собственно,
descriptions
на
is not
слайде
very
видно.
is even more
Все
detailed.
равно осталось высокого уровня
They
такое
give descriptions as
описание
a
самого
text,
use case, но
as you could
рекомендации
see on one of the slides.
появились
Again, they
детали.
describe use cases, but the recommendations now contain more details.
Поэтому, в принципе, полезного там достаточно много, количество сценариев тоже
And you can find
увеличилось,
a lot
можно
of
использовать это
useful
как методичку.
information there. And
Следующий
this one
проект —
I
это
can
плейбук
recommend
Jelly,
as a methodology,
сайт
real
incidentresponse.org.
methodology.
Там
The
представлены плейбуки в виде схем
incidentresponse.org,
вот
they
скриншотик одного
offer
этапа
playbooks
одного
as
use case.
schematics. That's a screenshot of one of the use cases.
Кейсы тоже высокоуровневые, а
The
рекомендации
cases are also
еще
high
более
level, and the
высокоуровневые
recommendations, the
и
guidelines are
достаточно
even
абстрактные. 10
more
сценариев,
high
но все равно
level
туда
and
можно
pretty
подглядывать, перерабатывать
abstract.
их для себя.
They
Это
offer
тот формат,
9
который используется.
scenarios, but you can start with
Еще
them
один
and
документ, и на сайте
convert
Microsoft
them into
опубликован
what
Microsoft
applies to your
ER
situation better. Microsoft IR
Супер
Playbook.
хороший документ на самом деле. Вот
This is a
схемки из него.
super good document.
Там всего 3
It's a
сценария,
schematic
но в
from it.
целом там
It
300
contains
страниц
only 3
PDF-ки.
scenarios,
Очень хорошо
but it's a
написаны по процессы.
300-page long on PDF file. It describes
Все
the
3 сценария очень
processes.
хорошо расписаны.
All
Есть
the three
конкретика, прям
scenarios
по шагам, что
are,
нужно делать, какие команды запускать,
split
как к этому
into the
готовиться,
tiniest
и так
details.
далее, и
It
так далее, и
gives
так далее. Но эти
concrete
рекомендации, они
recommendations as
ориентированы
to
на
how to
продукты
set up
юмора.
your
Ну и, в
teams,
принципе,
how to
всего
work
лишь
with
3
the
сценария.
scripts. But they offer only three scenarios,
Последний
and all of
проект —
them are focused
это
on the
один
vendor's
проект Coverage
products.
React.
And
Собственно,
here's
это
another
фреймворк,
one,
который был
ATC
создан
project,
для
GitHub IO,
формализации
ATC
и
React.
описания
It's a
плейбуков по
framework that
реагированию.
was
Там появилась
developed
такая
to
сущность, как плейбук
automate
реагирования.
response.
Была введена сущность
It
со своей
now
структурой
contains
плейбук по
the
реагированию, выделены стадии по реагированию
it,
и
it
некоторые
identifies
действия
the
к реагированию.
response
Собственно,
stages
действия мапятся на стадии,
and
когда мы пишем контейнер.
actions.
Ну, мы вручную их
The actions are
мапим на
mapped into
стадии.
stages. You do it
А,
manually. You map into
Действия у нас
stages
с
manually.
правой стороны на слайде. Видно, что они достаточно абстрактны. То есть нам нужно сделать что-то на почтовом сервере с помощью
And you can
функциональности
see that
почтового
the
сервера,
suggested activities are
где
pretty
нужно, то есть
abstract.
нет
It tells
конкретики.
you that you need to do
Есть
something at the
множество
level of the
почтовых
mail
серверов,
server, but it's not specific.
разные,
Mail
PostFix,
servers,
Exchange
they
и все
come in
что
different
угодно.
shapes
Даже
and
если взять тот же
sizes,
самый Exchange,
Exchange,
то
PostScript,
на одном
whatever. And
конечно,
even
выполнить
if you
какую-то
take an Exchange, you would
команду, а
perform a
с новыми
certain command
обновлениями
on
эта
it
банальная
quite
команда не
successfully,
сработает.
but
Такой
without
конкретики
a
тут, к
particular
сожалению, не приведено.
update on a
Тем не
different
менее, есть
Exchange
полезные
server,
всякие
this
штуки, то есть
command
это все
will
равно
just
уже
not
такая
work.
формализация
Still,
описания
this
знаний
is
по
a useful
реагированию.
document because
Плюс
it
есть аналог
formalizes
Attack
knowledge on
Navigator —
response.
это React
It
Navigator.
also
Собственно, наши
offers React
действия по
Navigator.
реагированию, которые содержат
Our
парень-знания, они
activities
раскладываются на
to
матрице
respond
и подсвечиваются, исходя из того,
can
насколько
be
часто мы
presented as a
используем
matrix,
плейбуков
and then
цветами различными.
different
Когда мы создали плейбук, мы
color
можем
code is
попросить
used
его
to
сохранить
identify
и потом
the
парсировать цвета
prevalence of
и
those
использовать уже в
activities in
операционной
different
деятельности.
scenarios. You can also
Представление
support the
данных либо Confluence, либо внутренний веб-сервер.
templates and different
Чем он
formats.
полезен? Соответственно, вот такой формальный, во-первых,
Why is
описание,
it useful?
представление
Well,
видимых
again,
из-за
because
виде
it gives
хитмэпов
you formal
различных
descriptions as heat
позволяет
maps
достаточно
or
быстро и четко понимать, что у нас, в принципе,
matrices,
есть с
and
точки
it gives
зрения
you a quick
наполнения
idea
базы знаний и
of
насколько эти знания у
how
нас
much
уже
data we
реализованы в
have in
структуре.
the knowledge
Собственно,
database
корректировать
and
и разработку
whether the data
контента,
or this knowledge is used in
формализация
our
знаний и
practice.
описаний. И проверять,
It
насколько они
formalizes
реализованы.
the knowledge
Весьма и
and it can
весьма
help you test
полезный метод.
whether you
Собственно,
are
проект
using that
рассмотрели.
knowledge
Давайте
or
еще раз
not.
вернемся к тому,
So
насколько нам
now
именно
let's
проекты
go
помогают
back
для
to
в случае,
the
когда у нас произошел уже инцидент,
projects
ну, уже
and
стало
see whether
получше.
they are
То есть мы
helpful in
уже
case of a
хотя бы
real
из того же
incident.
React или схемок
You can use a
с других
React or
проектов
you can
понимаем,
use
что нам нужно делать,
schematics from
последовательность
other
шагов.
projects to understand what needs to be
Конкретики
done,
пока что
what is the
маловато.
sequence of
Приходится все
steps, and
равно
yet
идти гуглить на Stack Overflow,
these
там, где
guidelines are not
посмотреть, а
very
как же эти действия выполнять.
specific. You still have to Google, you have to
Но как
find
нам
out more
понятно, кто это
information
будет
about how to
делать
perform
и как
these
это надо
actions. It's
делать.
not clear who is going to do this, how it should be done.
И вообще нет нигде
And
упоминания о том, как,
no one mentions
что нужно делать, если вдруг у нас
what
там
needs to be done.
алерт, мы поняли, что это
If there is an
алерт-инцидент,
alert,
начали его
we
расследовать, а
understand
потом
that it's
появился
an
второй алерт,
incident alert.
и как
You
сопоставлять
start
это из одного алерта
investigating
и
the
понимать, что
first
это один и
alert,
тот же
and then
инцидент.
the second
Такой
alert comes.
информации, к сожалению, ни в
And how
одном
do
из
you
проектов
correlate
нету.
these alerts to
Поэтому
understand whether
мы
they
посчитали, что
refer
все-таки
to the
такая
same
структура базы
incident or
знаний
not?
немножко недостаточная, и
So
фреймворки
we
и
realized
рассмотрены
that this
недостаточными. Захотели
structure
немножко
of the
улучшить.
knowledge database is
И
not
по таким
sufficient, the
вопросам появился
frameworks are not
ERM&CK,
sufficient,
который
and
что-то
this is
расскажет
how
нам
we
про
ended up with ERM&CK. And Anton is going to talk
Спасибо,
more
Андрей.
about our project. Thanks, Andrei.
Раскроем немножечко, что же такое аббревиатура ERM&CK. Это
Okay,
Enterprise
ERM&CK
Response Model and
stands
Common
for
Knowledge.
Enterprise Response
Про
Model
Common
and
Knowledge
Common
будет в
Knowledge.
самом конце. Вот. Но в целом
We'll talk more about
основная
common
часть,
knowledge
вот мы
towards the end
сейчас
of the
будем рассказывать с вами
presentation,
про
but
то, что такое в нашем понимании вот это Enterprise
the main
Response Model.
content of this presentation
Цели
is
проекта
centered
какие
on
основные?
Enterprise
То есть
Response
прежде
Model.
всего это
What are the
предоставить
main
пользователю
objectives of the
удобный инструмент для
project? Well,
того,
first of all, we
чтобы
want to give the
он
user a
подготовился
useful
к
and an
реагированию.
easy-to-use tool
Как Андрей
to
сказал,
prepare
когда инцидент
themselves
случился,
to
вы начинаете
response. As Andreas has said, once the
рекомендации по тому,
incident
что в этом
has
случае
happened,
делать, там
you start
всегда
looking for
прежде всего идут рекомендации
recommendations
по подготовке,
and
что нужно было настроить
you
заранее и настраивать уже
find a
предварительно.
lot of recommendations
Ну,
about
конечно же,
the
можно, если
preparatory
там
stage.
выявили
Maybe it's
атакующего,
too late
переждать,
to prepare
что
for
он
an
еще
incident.
поделает,
If you've
посмотреть, и
identified
потом можно настроить
the
там какую-то
attacker,
логику
maybe you
или
can wait
настроить
until
заранее.
something
Но в
happens, and
целом лучше
maybe then you'll
подготовиться
be
к
able
каждому инциденту заранее.
to set up
Дальше.
a certain
Когда
response
человек
process. But
сталкивается с
maybe you will
инцидентом,
have
ему
that
нужно
time, but
понимать,
maybe
какие
not again.
конкретные действия нужно делать в
When you
конкретной
face an incident, you
инфраструктуре.
need to
Как сказал
understand
Андрей,
what must be
этих
done in
рекомендаций
your
нет нигде.
infrastructure. And like
Соответственно,
Andrei
хочется
was
сделать так,
saying,
чтобы
you
в
can't
единой
find
базе
these
знаний
specific recommendations anywhere. So it would be wonderful if in a database, in a knowledge database, we would have all information about the response. You compromise, there is a compromise. There is a particular script. You find the script in your knowledge base, and then you will know what to do exactly on that exchange, that version. And when the model
идеального состояния, на наш взгляд, можно уже будет делать автоматизацию,
upgraded sufficiently, then the scenarios could be automated and data can be analyzed.
Однажды ко мне в телегу постучал мой коллега из другой компании, который его
The background of the project is as follows. I got a message from a colleague from a different company, and this company has a customer. The customer got an incident. The perimeter was penetrated, the mail server was penetrated. It was proxy shell, actually. This vulnerability was, proxy vacuum. It was very popular in that period of time. And people who responded, people who respond to incidents, they're usually regular IT people in the companies. So SOC comes to them and tells them, hey, there is an incident, the hackers are already downloading your passwords. And then they started this exchange of opinion as to what needs to be done. Should we block the users first, or should we disconnect everyone from the network? So they came to me to ask for advice what they should be doing first, because certain data was already stolen. We started this discussion and we realized that sometimes if you do not respond to incidents regularly, if you are not an employee of an SOC, or if you are a regular security guy, you don't often understand what has to be done first thing in order to prevent further advancement of this attack. So we found React. It's a good project. The project wanted to formalize the domain of response, but the actions it suggested are very abstract. There are certain reasons why they chose that approach. We talked to the people behind this project, and they said that it's difficult to go deep into a particular scenario. MicroTech, for instance, they talk about techniques, but no one talks about procedure, because the procedures are very different. They're very diverse. It's easier to describe an abstract content because otherwise the model will be too complex. And we decided that actually we would like to collect that kind of knowledge, because the knowledge is out there. We constantly discuss that. Who did what? Which commands? The administrators have their own scripts, that they different scenarios. So we started with React. We forked it, and this is their data model. They have response scenarios that are containers for actions. They have these response actions, a list of them. The list of response actions that are used during the response, the actions are split into stages. The stages are very standard. And you can find them in different, all the 6 stages, you can find them in different standards. So we decided to expand on this model and add additional content that's missing from what's already available. So this is what we added. We added implementation of a response action. Every abstract action we supplemented with a description of actual activity. So the standard action is to block an account, but we need to describe how in a specific environment, using specific tools, the action should be performed. And this is how we end up with means of action. For instance, blocking an account in a domain. Then here, the purpose of the action is daemon active directory. In terms of software, it's an account, right? But we here talk about the level of the software, the Active Directory. And the means of action, or the means of impact is anything. You can do PowerShell, you can do anything. So you can block the account in the domain by using different means. The structure and the stages stayed the same, and then we realized that when you just write a list of actions, the actions are not correlated with each other through cause and effect. And the analyst, when an analyst reads a playbook, it's not very clear why these actions are listed in that particular order. So we decided that we needed to connect actions via resources. Every action comes with a prerequisite and with the result, the input and the output. So the output of one action is the prerequisite or the input for the other action, and this is how you build a chain of actions or a chain of events. So all the actions are interrelated, they're connected to each other, and all the scenarios are also tied to procedures. So there is a catalog of procedures, procedures for response. We'll explain later why we decided to do that. So you can find the description of the project in GitHub. You can build a website via ERM&CK docs. There is infrastructure profile, the threats, the scenarios, the actions, the software, and the artifacts. This is the content of our framework, the content that we use to describe the response domain. There is the dark theme as well, for those of you who prefer dark themes. As to procedures, a procedure or a threat, we call it both ways. Just like Mitra, we treat procedures as implementation of a technique. A successful password spraying via over is a specific threat, and you can write a playbook for that specific threat. You can also click on the list of threats. You will see a table of the threats, and then you select the threat. You can get additional information about that threat, mapping, classification, labels, and at the bottom you can see here response. For every threat there should be a playbook, and you can go onto this playbook to see what needs to be done. And the artifacts, they are resources. Well, we describe a threat. The analyst describes which content from the InfoSec domain are present there, because you need to have this information in order to understand which actions must be taken. Then there is description, what the attacker does during the attack. It can be useful if you face a particular threat. By reading this, you will understand what happens in your infrastructure. And then, following the link in the table, you can also get additional info. Let me dwell on some of these elements. There can be some embedded response scenarios. We know that often, like compromising of an account, it can be used in different attacks. So we describe a playbook for a particular case, but in that playbook, some elements can be a repetition of the elements from other playbooks. So they are the repetitive elements. They are the reproducible elements. Over here, you can see that they identify differently, like monitoring of an account. You can use PCM, or you can use whatever other tool you want to use to monitor the account. Also, in order to build a playbook, you can first identify its structure and the actions that haven't yet been implemented of the playbooks. They will be labeled in a particular way. They will be marked so that you can go back to them later. Now let's turn to actions. The actions describe abstract actions that must be performed. They don't give you specific details, like it says, delete a file. Delete a file, it's an abstract action, and you can perform it differently in different systems. You can do it remotely, you can do it via console, you can do it via scripts. So this is the abstract action. It has its own card, an insert, file. Now, and it has also a link to the stage to which this step belongs, and it is also connected with other actions. Now, let's hear from Andrei about the actions implementation. Now, this is what we missed. These are the details that we missed from the previous projects, earlier projects, the implementation stage, the applicability. Like Anton was saying, you can perform different actions by different means. And we talk here about different software. Either Linux, in Linux it will be done using one command, maybe it will be done with a different command. So we need a list of software. That's why we now have this content, the list of software. That's how it looks like in the interface. As to the SolDR, as to how this software card looks like, SolDR is an EDR class of products developed by Positive Technologies and CyberOK. In November last year, it became publicly available. We set up a website of the project containing its description, and we also published its source code. The images, you can download them, and you can try testing them. SolDR first gives you several main fields, an ID, a brief description, who entered the file, and a link to the project. And then in this red box at the bottom of the slide, you can see the list of implementations or implementation of actions that can be performed using this product. This information, you don't need to enter it separately. This information will be input automatically. As to implementations, they can differ, but the structure of the code is the same. The fields are standard, and the most important fields here are means of action and target of action. Means of action is which software can be used in order to perform this step. It says here solder NSP, and the target of action is where or which software can be used. SolDR is a cross-platform file for Linux, and I think there is one version for Mac as well. That's why you see this data here.
Это можно сделать. Дальше идет описание, ну, там
And after that follows a description. You can write it as an instruction, because this is an interactive module. Actually, you can select the necessary node and ask for it to send you the relevant file and the code. Here, user for Outlook access is shown. It's done via PowerShell. Again, it starts with a description of what is done, and then you see the code implementation, the script, or you attach a file, or the lines of the code that can be copied and executed, or you can parse that and automate your response.
Какие, в принципе, были полезные реализации? То есть, если вы какой-то вендор, который делает продукт, который помогает реагировать на инцидент, вы можете, соответственно,
you develop product for response. You can add your software to this common depository with the knowledge database. And since vendors know their products best, and the vendors can also help write implementations, the specific details of actions. If you're an admin, or if you're an InfoSec person and you use some open source utilities or embedded utilities, PowerShell, for instance, Bash, then you can also share that knowledge and you can add implementations for them. And you can also write an instruction with pictures, with whatever, and somebody else from the community can also help you write scripts for implementation. Everything that is added to the base should be validated by experts. So the command should not only be executable, but you should achieve the result that we aimed for.
Понимать, что этого действия будет достаточно, а не то, что у нас сколько отозвалось, потом заново почему-то появилось. Действий много, соответственно, реализация действий может быть больше, потому что под каждое действие можно различных софтов, с которыми это можно сделать.
We could have different software to use it, and for the user to actually who use this content for React and response activities, for them not to be confused, we created this infrastructure. You can create those software which you use specifically in your company as the general infrastructure software, as well as the software which assists you when you react and respond. And in this list of the specific CPI, you will get it when you check the playbook, and you will see only the implementation of the actions which are relevant specifically to you. For example, if you don't have SODR, you will not have the imitation or emulation of SODR, because we have the Soldering PowerShell. That's why we have implementation only for them. We have a flexible search for all the entities which are stored in the database. We open and we input some keywords, and we see the set of these entities, and we have the matches for these words, for these keywords, and we can get into this entity.
Так, ну, у нас еще есть некоторые планы, как этот проект развивать, и про ближайшие планы я
расскажу.
Есть такой проект, я надеюсь, знаете, использовали Attack Flow, который
There is a project called Attack Flow. Hope you've used it before. It has a semantic flow and allows to create a special schematics which describe the schemes of attacks. It uses atomic substances. You can bring them together in a chain, and you create this chain using a special constructor. It becomes formalized because you use pre-made, pre-ready entities. And then we changed Attack Flow into response flow so that we could have the similar chains for the response situation, and we add them to the playbook. And we could have these kind of schemes for the playbook. The only thing, it doesn't have the artifacts, because otherwise this scheme. But the project is ready and it can be used already. Some further plans, we want to create a list of recommendations. We have a specific set of recommendations and preparations. If we run the shell, then we use some module. Then we have pre-installed this module. You have to allow the execution of scripts. You will have to give some permissions, and you have to write specific permissions according to your infrastructure. And then you have to highlight what would be necessary to do, how can you react in response to the situation so that your structure is ready for the attacks. And at the end, we get a similar checklist for MS/IR playbooks. They have the similar checklist. It looks like this. So these are the future plans, but we would like to speak a little bit about the graph models, semantic connections, and so on.
В качестве направления дальнейшего развития проекта хотелось бы еще
For the future development of the project, we would like to formalize our framework even more. I already mentioned that we have artifacts, and we want to use these artifacts to connect actions between themselves. When the content is generated automatically, we'll be able to use them. And Andrei mentioned that if we want to connect different incidents together, then we'll be able to use those artifacts, so we call them resources. We could use them to connect different cases together. As a result, it will be a part of a bigger database of knowledge, where response is only a part of it. For example, we could connect the detection and reaction or response domain together, and they'll be able to see that you can respond to this situation in this way or that way. React is a part of atomic coverage, atomic threat coverage. We also looked at their approach. We checked through their database knowledge. And basically, their ideas inspired us to create this bigger knowledge database. This is how it looks right now. They have a set of domains. They have React domain. For emulation, they decided to use atomic red team. They used ATC mitigation policies and processes. Domains, but I believe it should be different. At least we would like the knowledge database to look like this. And we'll be able to see that some incident occurred, we had some correlation, and we'll be able to know what kind of data we need for this correlation to occur, so that the next time we'll be able to see that all this data is collected, all this data is analyzed, but then we'll be able to see what kind of mitigation processes we had to take so that we prevent similar attacks in the future, and obviously the response playbook on what we should do right now. Unfortunately, the color scheme is a little bit off, but here on the screen we have different colors. Some of them is colored with blue, which is what we have currently in ATC, and we have the red part, which is what we need to add. I had this on the previous slide. But still we need more semantics. And it will heavily depend on expert knowledge, and we'll believe the expert that they said, okay, so this is the situation, and we have to react and respond like this. We do not see any logical connections. But if we implement those artifacts, you don't really have to go into details and trying to look for. This scheme is that if we add some digital artifacts here in the middle, then you'll be able to connect different domains through them. And you'll be able to go to a deeper level of the fraction. Yeah, you can go into a deeper level, see more details, and then we'll be able to see more connected actions. So we'll be able to automate processes better, especially the playbook or maybe the actions and response to the actions of the attackers. So this is how it looks like in terms of the graph. This is the procedure we have on the left. If we formalize it and we describe it as a sequence of actions, then these actions have to be these two. We have the intersection at the resource level, and the resource which is added as a result of the attacker's activity will want to respond to it. For example, attackers add some malicious file to the computer, they run it, and during the counteraction, we would like to delete this file, and obviously we have some process which was run because of that file. So we started to look into this area, we started to see how do we find these resources, how do we formalize this area. We realized that there is a great thing called ERM&CK, semantic technologies. And this is a graph from one of the studies on how those graphs are used in cybersecurity. And here is a screenshot on how we took some artifacts from one of the projects. They enumerated all those artifacts and they connect entities. That's a project called Defend. They created their own ontology, connected between themselves, and through those resources, through digital artifact ontology, they can connect different resources. MITRE attack, MITRE defense, they can connect through they can connect offensive model with the defensive model. And they formalized MITRE defend metrics with how defenders reacted to specific actions of the attackers. For example, they scanned the files, maybe they run some correlation files, maybe they run some queries. They looked what kind of defensive actions the company took as opposed to the actions of the attacking team. I really like this approach, and we decided to use it in our domain, but we will have a little bit different. We'll have a response action set. So this is what we got.
У них есть некоторые
They have a few files, they have several entities which are structured hierarchically, and they mapped multiple functions to these resources, to these actions from different domains. They mapped both functions and the actions of the attackers. As a result, they have this big graph, and because they mapped two worlds into a single entity, they can see how these two worlds are interconnected. They can analyze the reputation of the sender, they can analyze the email, or they can analyze all the collections on the defensive side. So as a result, we can analyze and detect these attacks of the attackers. We apply this approach to our project, and we decided to connect different actions of the defenders, and as a result, we got this graph. It's a phishing playbook, and you can see the connections on how artifacts change, starting with the email, starting with the body of the email. It would have a link would go somewhere else, and IPs could be blocked. All of that is there in that graph. We will have a specific workshop dedicated to the current state. It will start at 1600. We will tell how do we add software, how do we work with react and response on this. If you can see the QR code, you can scan it, you can go to the chat of our community. We discuss open source projects. It's an open discussion, but obviously there is a code of conduct so that we avoid any toxic problems, any toxic communication. We will also have a sprint for correlation on how to write correlations. So previously, there was a presentation on how to write correlation using plugins. And after that, and after a workshop, we would like to have a sprint so that we could open a repository and we could contribute to it together. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ребят, спасибо большое вам за выступление. У нас осталось достаточно времени.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have some time for questions. I will give each of you a T-shirt, and you can select the question you like the most.
У нас есть вопрос.
So, do we have a question?
Я первый, да?
Да-да-да.
Отлично. У меня такой вопрос, насколько вот эти плейбуки превращаются в код и в сценарий, если это дать опытному...
Do those playbooks actually change into scenarios? Can you say that you can improve it 5 times, 10 times? Obviously, a playbook is great, but the best result is to get the source code so that it actually works.
Не очень понятно, в какой код должно превратиться.
Answer. I'm not really sure what kind of code you're talking about.
По реагированию, да?
Question. Yes, you have the code. What does it have to change into? You have a ERM&CK playbook. Answer. You can find some incident, you can find some procedure, what happened there. For example, my account was hacked, or maybe a server was compromised. You can use the playbook and see what kind of actions you have to do. And this is performed by an expert, a human being. Question. Did you analyze how better human beings respond compared to machines? Answer. It's not, we do not have an assessment, but compared to the person who doesn't know what to do, it's better. Question. If you can actually quantify it, if you have the figures, then the business will be interested in this. Answer. We have Sergey Soldatov in Kaspersky laboratory. He has a lot of metrics, and he must definitely should have these kind of metrics. The speed of response for the breach of security. And he has other metrics, but probably him to measure this metric.
И второй вопрос. Есть такое перспективное направление Secure Governance Risk Compliance.
There is a promise in area, secure government risk compliance, and it uses MITRE, DEFEND, it uses standards. But can you add ERM&CK playbooks and other tools too, or it's not even possible? Can you implement those playbooks there so that potentially they can be used for some customers? So the Secure Governance Risk Compliance platform would issue some recommendations later on, or you did not work into that area? Answer. We did not work into that area. Yes, because basically you need to add additional entities, you need to work with the logic. When we hear about risks, it's about probabilities, it's very complex calculations, it's much easier, and you have some technical threats from MITRE, and you know what you have to do in this and this case. And you can create your guidebook without assessing the risks at all.
Там вопрос. Надо выбирать.
Нет, я думаю, что...
Вроде слышно. Спасибо за доклад. Мне кажется, классная инициатива, особенно то, что можно...
Thank you for your presentation. I think it's a great initiative that you can combine different initiatives to create different playbooks, because usually it's a problem when you have some set of procedures in one playbook, then it refers to another playbook which doesn't have this kind of set of procedures. Do you have some experience where this playbook was used, maybe in some small company, maybe in some commercial area? Do you have production experience by real-time analysts? Answer. Thank you for the question. Among the SOC teams, I think our SPT SOC team used it the most because they came to them, I said, okay, we have this kind of initiative. They gave me a few ideas, and they gave us some feedback. I'm not saying that they are using it as their main tool, but they try at least to use it, and they give us some feedback so that we know how to improve it. Why did we decide to talk about this during PhD, during the workshop session? Not because we wanted to brag that we were able to create this and this. But another reason is that the standardization of the playbook. The main reason why we did so they created a standard, and I was actually trying to Google it, and I was not able to find a single application of that standard. The last time it was active in 2020, obviously it was because of COVID-19, but it's not used anywhere. Carbon black, for example, exists, elastics and stuff. People who work with reactive response, and they never mention this standard. Everybody uses different standards, so having a single standard and working and using this together as a community. Because when everybody tries to use their own format, creates their own expertise, they do not share these technologies. There is no comprehensive knowledge database, and it's really, really sad. And we wanted to get to the single standard, and obviously you can share with other experts, put it in the shared repository and use it together.
В данный момент, вопрос, в данный момент только наш СОК занимается. Во-первых, мы израильской компании, я не работаю в позитиве.
Is it only our SOC which works with this standard?
Честно говоря, просто ERM&CK не так много времени.
Answer. Well, to be honest, ERM&CK is not that old. Basically, that's the first public release. And it's more about the data model.
И, собственно, мы сюда пришли как раз-таки с предложением наполнять ее. То есть модель данных в каком-то виде придумали, мы открыты абсолютно к обратной связи.
We are open to the feedback, we are open to discussion, we are open to adding some features regarding the model, regarding the framework. Obviously, we do have some plans, but we can expand it You can write us, you can use email, you can write us via Telegram. And obviously we want to improve it, we want to enhance it so that the model will be able to cover the preparation for detects, for audits, for hardening, for investigations, for response, so that all of them would be within the single knowledge database and it would actually work.
А вот здесь мужчина давно поднимал руку. Дайте, пожалуйста, микрофон.
Там выбрать, мне кажется, надо.
Спасибо за доклад и спасибо за инициативу.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for your initiative. I have two questions.
Вы в начале выступления привели пример, как вот некий факт компрометации к ERM&CK. Приходят люди,
ничего не знают, они далеки от TBT. There are some people who are very far away from TB and cybersecurity, but they at least know what to do, but other people really have no idea what they have to do. So at least we have to know this pre-procedure analysis. We have to know what was the breach, where was the breach. So that's the first question. And second question, who validates the scenarios in your open project, especially those scenarios which will be contributed by users and those scenarios connected with some commercial software? How do you plan this validation process for these scenarios? Answer. So the target audience, I think there are two main profiles. One is just a general user. It can be anyone. If somebody reacts and responds, they know what they have to do. But that's not the case, especially when they have to respond to the threat according to the state standard. Not always they know what to do and how to do this. If you are a good expert and you know how to respond to the threat, obviously the whole community will be grateful to you if you share this knowledge. Unfortunately, in most cases, the most experts, some number of cases, some number of experts react. They react incorrectly. If we're speaking about TBT, for example, the information was dumped and you have to reset the password twice. But those experts, they do not take into account this, and they do not play by the handbook, they do not play by the guidebook, and this is not enough. And that was one of the reasons why this general knowledge database was organized. Those experience and now can share it so that everybody else would avoid these mistakes and pitfalls. And speaking about the validation, first is the general users, and the audience are the expert users, those who know what to do and how to do it. And they are the content creator in this case. Question. So the main terms of this project would be the full range of all vendors, and you can validate all the scenarios which are connected to some proprietary systems or response and reaction. Is this correct? Answer. We don't have this kind of vendors and maintainers. The initiative is open, and we want people to join the project. We want those who have the expertise to validate. Obviously, we have some pool of experts. They know something about React and response, but they might not know something about the proprietary software. If there is some rare software which will be added to it, I think it will be case-by-case scenario. Question. So it will be about the openness, but in the example, it was not even public with PowerShell. It was connected to PTT, XDR. So that's the question. Answer.
Соответственно, есть абстрактные действия.
So we have abstract actions.
Публикуются, как это можно делать с разным ПО.
They are publicly published. If you have a different vendor, for example, and you react oftentimes, and you can actually go and share your experience if you use the same CM, those who use the same CM will be grateful to you. And this is what we do. We share our experience, but we obviously cannot create a guidebook for what we do not use. Question. So that's the part of my question. If I provide some information to you, something which is not obvious and clear in the scenario until you actually work on the hardware, work on the software, answer, that's actually a very, very good recommendation. It's a very good question. I think it's even better when working on the Python library. But in general, I would say that the validator would be an expert from the vendor side. Anyone can write it, the scenario, not only experts on some product, but the validator would be from the vendor side. We believe that that's the correct way to do it. And playbooks have certain... And the playbook has certain information where you can see that it was approved or it was not approved. Yes, the status changes. And another point regarding the screen, yes, it was a little bit of our mistake. We have two parts. We have CyberArk and Positive Technologies. And we have a positive repository and we have a public repository. But what you saw on the screenshot is not present in the public repository. And when we work with a vendor, anyone who uses this or that product, who owns this product, should just come and go and say, so this is how it looks publicly in our network. I was asked about web shells and how to detect them. And if you want to detect them with SODR, can you differentiate SODR with ELK? And we actually worked with HELK, HELK. Anybody used it for requests and stuff?
Полезно для примера. Окей.
Oh, maybe it will be useful. It will be useful, yes. So we have one user of HELK. Maybe it will be useful. Do we have some time for 1-2 questions, maybe?
Еще раз большое спасибо за доклад.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question, you have the playbook, and it would be good to test it, okay? For example, in Nitro, there is a project, Aldero code. Will you test it somewhere in that framework? For example, we create a framework, we have a button to test it, and then we'll be able to see how it works in practice. Answer, we are far from the automated data model, because if it's not very precise for some specific cases, which we covered before, in the future, the playbooks will be automatically generated, we'll be able to work with other automation services, but it will be in the future. Currently, it works as a knowledge database. But actually, that question is very good. We had a similar question, why we actually created this broad knowledge database. We needed an emulation of attack, we need detection, we need react and response. And we had to go through the whole cycle, because the implementation from emulation to response, I did not see it anywhere. I actually went from emulation to detection myself. We had this in plans, obviously, but response was not there. And for that reason, we have to change the model, and we have to change it substantially so that it would work. Yes, by change, I mean improve compared to the legacy approaches we had before. Thank you very much for your attention. We are out of time.
Ребят, спасибо вам большое за выступление. Всем спасибо за внимание.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
У нас сейчас будет небольшой перерывчик.
We will have a short break.